Just a few words about the way we tackle this, what we call Lectio Divina, that is, taking some spiritual text and selectively, well, non-selectively really, almost randomly opening it and seeing what we have. And those who know me will know that I often ask people, take a book, select any book you like, and open it at random. And it's strange how some people do that. Instead of opening it, they open it, and without even looking, they go to another page. So this is a technique which, of course, the Benedictine brothers and sisters use. But we also use it because when we study a scripture, we have to hear it, that is, Shravana, hear it. And these days, there is lots of scope for hearing. Many YouTube videos are there today with spiritual subjects, many with many other kinds of subjects also. And so there are opportunities to divert our minds, but we may as well use what we have in contemporary life. So, as with anything, technology can be a distraction or it can be something that is useful to us. Just take the ordinary cell phone. Today, if you wander around without a cell phone, you feel as if you're unclothed in some way or another, unequipped, something got left behind, like your wallet got left behind or something. And yet, not so long ago, very recently, these technologies were not available to us. Cell phones were not there. In fact, when I grew up, we didn't have such a thing as a phone. End of story. Whether it was never mind a mobile phone, a landline phone also was not available. Television was not available. It was available to some households, but not in mine. And definitely cars were out of the question. And if you wanted to travel to a distant land, something almost unheard of, you would have to go to a land by ship. Travel by plane was hardly noticeable. So when we look at this question of Shravana, this approach, we can say, Shravana, that is hearing. Now, hearing is something that is a little controversial. Sometimes we think we listen, but we don't. And Shravana, in terms of scripture, is taking your attention and really absorbing the words which are there. So you can open a book, for example, and something will catch your eye. It may be a paragraph. And then you'll see, actually, it was a sentence that caught my attention. Then it was a word. And now we have a second stage to go to. Now, what prevents us from really reading or listening? Reading, listening can be the same thing. And one thing is that we often lack our concentration because we don't listen with our full capacity for attention, even in common communication. What are the clues for a non-listening person? If you think that you are listening, please undergo a certain number of tests. Firstly, while a person is speaking, are you formulating your own point of view or a reply? That means you're not really listening to them. Are you observing the non-verbal messages going on? That is, the look of the person's face, the expression, the tone of words that are being used, and maybe hand gestures. Body postures. Are you observing this? Are you interrupting halfway through the sentence, anxious to put your point of view? That means you're not listening. Are you completing somebody's sentences for them? You know the old story, I met somebody at the airport, no, in the shop. And they said to me, oh, is your health good? No. I was going to talk to you about the oncoming weather. And I met, oh, your cousin? No. I met an old friend from school days. See, we get the wrong picture because we're anxious to interrupt. I think Patanjali has it right. He refers to one aspect of this as a kind of verbal delusion. Getting the wrong end of the stick is the phrase we have. A misunderstanding by imagining something different and completing something. All of this is a lack of listening skills. Sometimes we agree too readily, thinking that we've grasped what the person wants to say. But communication at a one-to-one level is very often a conveyance of what a person is feeling, not about facts and figures. Facts and figures we can get quantities from anywhere, and today we can get them extremely quickly. Nowadays I notice when I make a statement to a person of a younger generation is not that difficult to find, because as you get older, many more people become less old as you. And immediately you tell them something, immediately they're distracted. What are they doing? They're looking it up on the media, or Google or something like that, to verify what I've just said or to get more information. This is the age in which we live. But now what is this doing? Very often it's filling the head with stuff, and the stuff is not that useful. And we always have to remind ourselves what we mean by scripture. And in order to do that, we also have to remind ourselves of why we are studying in the first place. And that brings up the question, why are we engaged in any form of occupation? Why are we alive? These are very profound questions, asked for many thousands and thousands of years. Is there any meaning of life, or what is the meaning of life? Now our conclusion is we have a destiny, and Swami Vivekananda summarizes in this very brief statement, each soul is potentially divine. And the goal is to manifest this divinity. So simple as that. What stops us from reaching our goal? We are on a journey with many opportunities for deviations. We go here, we go there, and deviations are also distractions, sometimes to the extent of delaying us because we've lost the whole thrust of life. Where are we going? If a child is in front, one way of usefully putting it is, life is a journey, and you are the traveler. You come from God and you go to God. Now, forgetfulness of this we call technically ignorance. And our whole effort should be there to try and get knowledge, not knowledge of an intellectual kind, but knowledge meaning a true understanding. And so listening is the first thing, Shravana. Manana means reflecting on it, contemplation. And reflection on it is an exploration. It's kind of exploration. Something is being stated. It's more than just the surface. Let us try to find out what is meant by the person who wrote this or the person who spoke this. Not only so that we get the true meaning, but we're also able to validate the statement that we are reading from a point of view of understanding. Do we understand what is being told? For example, Jesus is declaring, I and the Father are one. And he's saying also, I am the gateway, I am the way. And we can put an interpretation on that to say, Jesus is saying, it is only possible to fulfill this goal, to complete your purpose, through me, whatever that means, from your devotion to me personally. But then if you explore, when you say that, is it Jesus, the historical figure? In which case it doesn't make that much sense. Or is it adhering to the things that he's saying? That makes a lot more sense. Or Is he speaking from a special place? Is he speaking from a more universal angle? And we get the clue, in the beginning was the Word, and so it goes on like that. Now we have a context for it. Now we can go from the idea of a person, historically speaking, to somebody whose words are applicable, and we have to find out the context. And they could be applicable in a different way. Ultimately, we find out what that is. And we see that in John's Gospel, there is, in the beginning was the Word. In other words, when there is a creation, when there's a creative movement, everything begins from a logos, an old word, Greek word, really, implying intelligence, implying many, many different things, but theology has taken it to mean word. What is that meaning? Meaning is that there is somehow an initial impetus to all things that vibrate and oscillate, that come and condenses our world, in which case it makes sense to say only through there. Now, we can modify a little bit and say mostly through there. There are two ways to manifest this divinity. The one way is go directly. Think of it like a mountain. You want to get to the top. The goal is getting to the top. And so we can go directly. This is a very tough way. It requires huge concentration. It means we avoid all the highways and byways. And it's no doubt a quick journey, but it's an arduous journey. It requires incredible concentration. And when we talk about concentration, it means the capacity to eliminate a sense of time and to do it in the quickest possible way, releasing the maximum amount of energy. And concentration then becomes a revealing thing also. And so it's no surprise that when we dedicate all our energy to this, then we come across a revelation. And this is the path of jnana. And we bypass all the categories that Sankhya provides us. We can see the world as a number of divided things, a number of different parts. Something like, again, using the analogy of a mountain, going up the mountain, and then the possibility of diverting the mind here and there. The wonderful song, of course, that Naran, the future Swami Vivekananda, sings to his master Ramakrishna. And it's about a kind of a journey. Oh, my mind, it's addressed to the mind. It's a very good idea to address things to the mind, like a kindly uncle or aunt, a kind of tutor saying, look, oh my mind, oh my child, I know you're restless, I know you go here and there, I know you have an element of turbulence, never mind. Come, let us guide you in a different way. And in doing that, let us calm you. Let us make sure that you are devoid of anxieties and stress and all the things, and fears and doubts and all of those kinds of things. Let us smooth you out. Let us pacify you. Let us clarify you. Let us purify you. And then, how do we do it? We suggest to the mind various ways. And these ways, of course, are many. We are discussing one of these ways. That when you take up a reading, you have first heard it, Shravana. Now you are reflecting on it, manana. And reflection takes an element of openness, silence, objectivity, so that you can sort things out. And then comes the final step, and that is nididhyasana, that is meditating on it. And meditating means not just the contemplation, it means going underneath to the real, much deeper meaning that touches our soul in a way that creates a thrill and awakening. Now we understand what any passage means in Scripture. But then what do we mean by scripture or a holy book? What we mean is a description of somebody who has previously done this journey, gone on this journey, has understood empirically what is there behind everything, the source of everything. This manifested potential has manifested it, brought it out. It's no longer potential. It is there as a reality. And such people then have a method. What is that method? A kind of introspection, a kind of spiritual intuition. It's not the normal method of getting information and knowledge, which is all toward the outside. You can see that the sense organs are something like windows, and they're all open to the outside. And sometimes what comes through them, through these windows, will be something like a turbulent wind. And sometimes it'll be like a gentle breeze. But what will we do with it? One intelligent person, says the Kathopanishad, instead of looking outward, he or she decides to go inward, look inward. And looking inward means revealing vaster areas, more subtle areas, and more truthful areas. And this journey is what we call meditation. Now, all that just from catching a passage and understanding that scripture is a record of such a person, with this one caveat, not really a caveat, is this one hopeful note in the music, and that is that it provides you with the possibility that you can duplicate this journey. That is why Swami Vivekananda used to carry around 2 books in his wandering days, Bhagavad Gita and Imitation of Christ. We have to take our model and imitate that. There's a wonderful description of that in the Mundaka Upanishad, describing 2 birds on a tree. We can take that passage also and see how that looks. We all have a model. That's why it's very difficult, no matter what people say in this day and age, reducing everything to material science. It's very difficult for people to say, I'm an atheist, because everybody has some ideal of perfection somewhere. Be it a comic character in a magazine, be it some kind of thing like a Superman. Nietzsche gives us this model, or be it some kind of ideal, a person we admire most for a specific reason. We can surely write down at least 3 people who we would like to emulate. We'd like to emulate their behavior. We see them as models, ideal models. And then there's a gap. The gap is ourselves and the model of perfection. And then how do we cultivate and how do we shape our life in such a way that the gap closes and we get closer to becoming this model? Well, this model, of course, is nothing more than something that is omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. In short, it is God, what religion calls God. You have to understand that God is an English word. It is derived from the Germanic hut, and that is in turn derived from the Indo-European, or the Sanskrit, I should say, hutam, so it's speculated, which means one worthy of offering something to, one worthy of worship. So that's the other route. The one route is direct, not through this word. The other one is progressively through this word, that is through God, and from there going on. So the Upanishads will describe that process. If you led a good life, a moral life, you did all good deeds, you served the poor, you had an interest in social upliftment, you were a good character, at your funeral the eulogy will be, this was a thoroughly good person. This was a person who was a model citizen. But you see, not yet free, we have to add, not having manifested fully this divinity. And so, where is that person destined? Person is destined to reap the rewards in the afterlife according to the Vedanta. And that's described curiously as going along the path, the dark fortnight, if you will, the dark half of the year, going to the moon, because the moon represents the mind. And the moon and the mind is a reflection. It shines not because it is self-effulgent. It shines because the sun beams its photons on the moon and lights it up. And the moon in many places, in craters and so on, looks as if it is something that is shiny, not just shining. And why is that? Because meteorites hitting the surface will blow up vast amounts of sand and dust particles. They all settle. And these particles are silica or sand. We can also say glass. They're glassy particles made to shine, made to refract the light. And we see it, oh, beautiful moon. And that inspires poetry. It inspires the mind itself. These people reap the profits of their good deeds. No more effects are made according to that system. And having enjoyed, having spent their pocket money, their earthly pocket money, they now have to continue their journey. And to do that, we require the human body, because human body and mind is the only equipment, suitable equipment that we have to transform our reality and to reveal this knowledge to us. We do it through the mind. The mind captivates us, the mind releases us. And then the other path, though, will be more direct. It will go to this eternal world. It will go to the path what's described as the sun. It goes to there, no further karma to do. It waits there, as it were, in the realm of Brahma, in the realm of the cosmic mind, in the lap of God, if you wish, and at the end of a whole period of time melts into the amorphous equilibrium of nature until it all erupts again. But then a third way is there, and that is, you purchase your one-way ticket now, you get your moksha, your freedom now, and that you disappear, like the salt doll in Ramakrishna's example, into the blissful state of pure existence, pure consciousness, and pure bliss, the ocean of existence. So there are these various ways. This is a part of the reflection on the language of Jesus, and understanding that in a more detailed way, as we have done, will give us a better understanding of Jesus' words. If we didn't go through this astute observational hearing, this astute and detailed reflection, contemplation, taking the mind on an exploration and a journey, and ultimately this nityatyasana, where we really understand the import, and we understand not just the words and where they came from and the expressions, but we actually go into the mind, as it were, or into the heart of the one who is giving this wonderful wisdom that is contained in Scripture. Now then, just to mention, when you take this Lectio Divina approach, we have to have this open mind, and openness requires openness to a divine spirit. That is why, reflecting a little bit, opening a book just anywhere, and then catching that and reading that, and that is why we do it with the understanding grace is flowing within me, and grace is revealing something to me, and I don't have to do anything because the finger of the divine is pointing to the page, pointing to the passage, and wants me to learn something there and get something important for me. So I know many have experienced this. In a group, let's say, of half a dozen people, you get them to catch a book, and a different book, and even in the process of selecting it from the bookshelf, somehow there's no conscious effort to do it. The instruction is, look at the books, see a title, pick it, and come and sit down, open the thing randomly, read a passage, let's explore it together. That's the process. So this is one way of exercising devotion. There are other ways as well: chanting, singing, even dancing, expressing oneself in prayer, japa, service. All of these things are to do with the expression of your emotions. Now, in a song of thankfulness. Now we're just going to open this book at randomly, and immediately we come to a heading: Maharashtra Women Saints. Don't forget, this is a book on saints for East and West. So we can explore some of these stories, and of course this is actually a title. It's not specifically to do with a particular saint, just saints in general. And for that reason, you'll find some rather strange words to many people's ears. But I'm not going to read this. I'm going to pick up just what appeals to me. Rajai was the wife of Namadeva, and Gunai was his mother. That's where I'm picking it up from. These two were saints because of their association with Namadeva, who had no interest in life except God. Now, because I'm reading this to you, we could go on, but we could also stop there and explore that. So there were some saints, two saints, and Rajai is the wife of one of them. And what makes them saints is these two were saints because of their association with Namadeva, Namadeva had no interest in life except God. Now that seems quite strange to many people in a modern world. I have many interests. I play soccer, I do this, I do that, I have many sports, I have many other interests. Besides, I may have a family. So I have an interest in my daughter, my son, their careers, and maybe I'm also working. Maybe I also have a career, so I have an interest in that as well. And then I have an interest in the wider range of the family, mother-in-laws and father-in-laws and the brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws, and then my own cousins and nieces, and so we could go on like that. And you see, as we're talking, we're going from simplicity to complexity. The web gets broader and more complicated until we can say, well, we can map up a whole family history, a whole genealogy can emerge from this way of thinking. And then it's not just about that. It's about the problem areas in every one of these dimensions. And we could easily allow that to take over our whole mind, so that when we put our head on a pillow at night, first thing that comes is this undercurrent of concern. Oh, this person said that to me today, or this activity was like this, or I wonder what people think of me in that. And you find as you sleep, your last thought on sleeping is inevitably your first thought on waking. And then how did you sleep? Oh, I had a restless night, I hardly slept. Yes, actually sleep by its nature is restless. Studies in sleep will tell us that we go through 4 or 5 cycles or phases. We drift off initially into a kind of amorphous, dreamy sort of world, half conscious, half unconscious. And then we come across our first dream. And then once the dream is over, and we know the dreaming phase because sleep therapists and sleep scientists, people who study the phenomena of sleep, trying to figure out, is there a purpose to it? What makes good sleep? What makes bad sleep? What are the brain waves that are going on during the different phases? And we know that dream is accompanied by a physical phenomena which is called rapid eye movement. The eyes dart from place to place, not just humans. You can see it in animals. I'm sure you've witnessed a dog who's chasing rabbits or whatever the dog is doing in a dream and moving on. So when we can see this and understand this phenomena, a couple of things may also occur to us, that the problems, so-called problems that we have in life are all concerned with only one phase of this life. And if we wish to drag it into the dreams to try and bring our anxiety and sort our problems out in a dream and have this repetitive scenario of disturbance in a dream, it'll come out also there. But regardless of that, at some stage, this rapid eye movement yields to a deep sleep. And in this deep sleep, there is no time, no space. In this deep sleep, there's only an awareness of peace going on. So when you talk about yoga nidra, you're not talking about snoring. You're talking about a sleep with an element of yoga, that is awareness, a kind of preparation. Like a lion, before it leaps on its prey, it stands still, extremely calm and concentrated. And it is only focused on one subject. So, is it possible, amidst all of these things, to be like the saint and have no interest in life except God? And the answer is, you're encouraged to do so. But how can you do so in the midst of all this noise, all these disturbances, all these things which seem to take a priority in our life and take us away from the central goal, central purpose? And very often, it's a common question on these kinds of sessions. In the midst of all my activities, how can I steer this life toward, how can I engage in spiritual life, thinking that spiritual life and secular life are totally separate and divided? And they're not. And they're not on the basis that what we see as so-called life is a series of fragments. But what makes the fragments? The mind itself makes the fragments. Fragments of what? When we are able to shift things and see things much clearly with insight of these great saints, we will only see this smooth oneness. And smooth oneness is just a way of telling you something verbally and symbolically, because the actual spirit experience is indescribable. And so that is God. When we see that and see it in a manifest state, then in a potential state, when we see the relative world, we cannot see the absolute. When we are in the absolute, as it were, the relative, not only can we not see it, it's gone completely. If we arrange ourselves to be internal to cosmic mind, sitting on God's lap, then we will see the both sides. We will see the glimpse of the absolute on the one side and the glimpse of the relative on the other side, a kind of what is called, savikalpa samadhi, that is without any disturbance or cycle. And yet there's still awareness of an individuality, like standing in a room which is completely lit, which is completely full of joy and bliss, and looking back on several other rooms, all progressively lit in a better way until we come to the one we're in. We can look back on that. That's the relative world. And then you look on the other side, and there is no room at all, only a pure, pure burning light, brighter than the sun. And you know that that's the absolute. It's like that. All examples, analogies have their difficulties. They're only symbolic. And so you have the choice. Will I enter into there? Will I remain here? I certainly don't want to go back, but if I have a freedom and know where I'm going, I can go back and forth also. True freedom is the capacity to do that. And so, no interest in life except for God. Well, what is God? And when we talk about God in this context, we're talking about that one that is responsible for the harmony and the regularity and the rhythm of the whole universe. How can we live our life where we have absolutely no interest in life? And what we mean by life, what we mean is something which is not God. But when we register everything as God in a progression, we were discussing the other day, or the other kind of a breakfast, a devotee came. They wanted to seek out the company of Swami Purnananda, who was recently visiting and is a beautiful speaker. And he gave a beautiful retreat and so on, and a talk at Trinity College and so on, and also here in the ashram on Friday evening. And so he was trying to grasp this idea of a relative and absolute and so on, that there is only one thing, and yet it doesn't seem to be like that, all these philosophical positions. And then I said to him, I said, you see, it's a progression. First, you try to see the divine self or God in everything. That means in including yourself. So in the morning, early morning, before all your life begins, you budget some time as the highest priority of your entire day to sit and see that God in you, see the divine in you, contact that divine in you, make a nice union in you, and the path of love makes it very sweet. You can internally have a wonderful internal song of thankfulness and joy that God is with you, is your companion. You're sitting in presence, not an august presence, but in a presence which has a relationship with you and you with that being, a personal relationship. And so that is how your day can begin in this way. You're setting up a kind of battery charge for the rest of your day, and using japa, you can use chanting, many things you can use. But then you see, most people today will have to, even those who are encouraged to work at home, will have to have some days today at an office somewhere, and it requires some travel. That travel is also a divine journey if you look at it in this way. If you make a separation, you're in trouble. Supposing you have to travel on public transport. Every day you do it for extended periods of time. It wears you down. At the end of the day, you say, I'm completely exhausted because my energy is drained, because all of these people of mixed character are all around me. And so naturally, I get their energy. Me being a good person. See the egoism there. And the misunderstanding. There's only one energy, divine energy, expressed through 1,000 hands, 1,000 eyes. This idea of throughness, which is mentioned in texts like the Shvatashvara Upanishad and others, and Gita as well, with 1,000 heads, means through every head you can see the divine glory being expressed. If you have an eye to catch it, if you have the principle of the philosophy behind you, and then you understand it, you feel it. So that's the next stage through. In people, in places, in events, including starting off with your own, then through everything, and then as everything is the next step. As everything. That means that as means, where is the separation between the ultimate, the absolute and the relative? There is no separation. One is unblemished. One has never been disturbed. And it's not that there are two separate gods either. It's the same entity expressed. It's like a spider weaving a web from itself, making this manifest world. Where is God, therefore? Everywhere you look, as When the Bhagavad Gita sets out all the glories of the divine, I am this, I am that, and so on. It says, I am that, I am that, I am that, I am that. Of all the sciences, I am the science of the self. It's not I'm in it, not I'm through it, I'm as it. Everything is as. And then beyond. In, through, as, and beyond is the process. In this way, our life becomes saturated with the divine and the knowledge of the divine, and we become the recipients of divine grace that fills us like a vessel is being filled with wonderful, wonderful honeyed nectar. Or, in my own way of thinking, filling up with wonderful, joyful hot tea, which is sweetened with honey. So, he had no interest in life except for God. And since we are immersed in what we call life, then it means my central interest is God, and I don't see life as anything separate. Then it goes on, he was a great devotee of God. There are stray blank verses composed by Rajai and Gonai, which are extant. As is only natural, they did their best to prevent Namadev as much as they could from neglecting all family affairs, as he did, because he would have made a mistake. He makes the mistake, no matter how holy, that the family is somehow nothing to do with spiritual life. However, having said that, one can get to a stage where even family life is viewed as something that is capable of embroiling the mind. That is also what is being described. It appears that Namadeva had traveled all over India and had even been to Punjab. And in his early life, he was very wild. But later on, he reformed himself and became a saint because of close association with Yaneshwar monks who came to the Pandharpur temple. Now, in that whole thing is a wonderful lesson. How do we keep the mind engaged in the divine? Keeping holy company, visiting places on pilgrimage, going to temples, going to ashrams. The easy example, the counter example would be if I have a problem with drinks and drugs and keep company with people who habitually take these things, and I go, let's say, to the Alcoholics Anonymous, then what's the point in me tempting the mind into all of these things again? That wouldn't make much sense. The opposite would be true. That we engage in the company of uplifting, joyful, and sober people. People who not only understand the same things as I understand, but can mutually uplift each other. And Yaneshwar is the first great saint with whom the series of successive saints in Maharashtra began. He wrote, and we're talking of 1290, of this period of time, AD, or what some people call this current era, CE, current era. And now in 1290, well, first of all, his background reminds us very much of Augustine, who was also wild, who also enjoyed the senses and so on. And it tells us two things. The one thing it tells us is, no matter how wayward we are, there is hope for us. We also bear in mind Girish Chandra Ghosh, the kind of bohemian actor, playwright, who himself led a kind of bohemian lifestyle. Or we can take all those great geniuses, for example, in the period, that period of the 19th century and early part of the 20th century, where great revolutionary artists, poets, musicians would have formed. So, for example, I can see there Hamsini is there, and we would know that Eric Sadi, I think his name is, who was a great, great composer, curious style, was happy to live in the Montmartre area with a bohemian lifestyle, living with her companion. They had to share a pair of trousers together, and it was often had holes in and so on and so forth. They were happy to live a bare existence. Now you might say almost a monastic existence, except, of course, they were libertines a little bit and enjoyed life from a sense point of view. But you have this kind of lifestyle which cannot be the end, or doesn't have to be the end. And there can be a great awakening that comes from it. We come back to the example of the Mundaka Upanishad, which tells us, and Mundaka itself means renunciation, literally a shaving, taking off something, and the two birds which are there on the same tree. And both of them are named the same. And one is representing an ideal of perfection, and the other one is drowning, as it were, in bittersweet fruits of life. And we can continue the story going up the tree. A tree is often used to represent samsara, this life. And as he goes up, he's tasting something which is more bitter and being inspired upward, but always inspired upward until at the top he understands, I am that beaming Purusha. I am that one. I was always there. I was always that. But what is life teaching us? All the debauchery in the world will produce pain. But pain itself is a wonderful teacher. If we take notice of the lessons, it can inspire us upwards. So he wrote in 1290, and 1290, when we think of that, 13th century, what was happening in the world in the 13th century? The Norman nobility were called upon in Ireland in the 12th century to come and assist in tribal affairs, or regional kings having wars, and nobody suspected they came to stay and build castles. So by 1290, the number of buildings that were built were all magnificent Norman castles. On the other hand, in other parts of the world, magnificent temples were being built. Anyway, he wrote his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. This is Jnaneshwari. And even before Jnaneshwari, there was a great deal of Mahanubhava literature, that is, literature of devotion, in the Marathi language. So, of course, it was a secret sect by all accounts, and it didn't flourish well for a number of reasons, but we leave that aside. Now, we started off by quoting from a book, Women Saints of East and West, and so far we haven't come across the woman side of it, except for reference to Rajai as the wife of Namadeva and Gunai as his mother. But the next saint after Rajai is quoted as a saint, is Muktabai, and she was the sister of Jnaneshwara. And she was a very learned woman. She wrote a considerable number of poems. Now, why would she write a considerable number of poems? Because it is the artistic side of us that really rallies what some people call the right brain. That is the emotional feeling side of things, the qualitative side of things, rather than the quantitative side of things. The things which are not strictly to do with logic or strictly to do with order, an area of creativity. And this area of creativity is actually a potential divine awaiting expression. And so this art and culture plays a great role. We can see it, of course, in great churches and temples, in architectural structures dedicated to worship. We can see this. buildings taking sometimes 30, 40, 50 years to build, all engaging different artisans. Every brick laid must have been something like an offering to the divine. I don't think it could be just a labor. It was a labor of love. So these are just some thoughts on this method of reading or studying a spiritual text, a scriptural text, and getting some value that leads us into a meditation. Well, that's all I have to say really on the matter. We wish you all peace. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om